McConnell has a warning for us all. The Russians are not our friends. He's among those Republicans supporting an investigation into intelligence agency assessments that Russia hacked our presidential election. But President-elect Donald Trump is blasting talk of a hack attack and saying if he'd tried playing that card, people would have called it a conspiracy theory. Of course, it's not a card. It's the assessment by the national security agencies. But it all comes as sources say that man, and Trump is ready to pick that man, ExxonMobil boss Rex Tillerson, as Secretary of State. Of course, he has close ties to your boy Vlad Putin. I had everything you need to know about the oil tycoon and stirring up China. Donald Trump says he is not sure that we have to go along with that nation's policy on Taiwan. Chinese media blasting it, calling him ignorant as a child. Let's get to it.
Now, Shepard Smith reporting live from the Fox News deck.
First from the Fox News deck on this Monday afternoon, the stunning conclusion from all 17 U.S. national intelligence agencies, all of them in lockstep, that the Russian government did intervene in the U.S. presidential election and is now bringing bipartisan action. The top Republican in the United States Senate, Republican, mind you, says it will investigate whether Russian hackers tried to help Donald Trump win the election. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell also said Moscow's meddling cannot be a partisan issue. Mitch McConnell said Russia's reported hacking, its invasion of Crimea, its opposition to NATO all come together to prove Moscow is trying to undermine America.
Well, let me just speak for myself. The Russians are not our friends. And I think we ought to approach all of these issues on the assumption that the Russians do not wish us well.
Well, this comes after two of Donald Trump's biggest Republican critics, Senators John McCain and Lindsey Graham, joined incoming Democratic Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and the Democratic Senator Jack Reed in calling for a bipartisan investigation. Senator McConnell says that it's hard to believe any Republicans could in any way ever be against reviewing these Russian tactics. But President-elect Donald Trump has called the CIA's assessment ridiculous, a statement he based on nothing. Tweeting today, can you imagine if the election results were the opposite and we tried to play the Russia CIA card? It would be called a conspiracy theory. Unless you catch hackers in the act, it's very hard to determine who was doing the hacking. Why wasn't this brought up before the election? It was brought up before the election, over and over and over again. U.S. officials absolutely did say before the election that Russian hackers stole emails from Democratic officials and gave them to the website WikiLeaks. But according to the Washington Post, the New York Times, and the CIA has since determined it was all part of an effort to help Donald Trump, not simply to disrupt the election, but to help Donald Trump. And 17 national security agencies are in on this assessment. The New York Times reports the hackers also targeted the Republican computer systems, but never released any stolen information there. So we don't know what they got, but we know that our intelligence agencies say they hacked into Republican computers too. And then there's the RNC chairman, Reince Priebus, who says nobody hacked their computers. And President-elect Trump says the hacking claims are all just sour grapes from Democrats, which is absolutely not true. These are the findings of 17 national security agencies, with evidence compiled before the election even happened. Still, here's what Trump told Fox News Sunday anchor Chris Wallace in an interview that aired just yesterday.
They have no idea if it's Russia or China or somebody. It could be somebody sitting in a bed someplace. I mean, they have no idea.
So why would the CIA put out the story that the Russians wanted you to win?
Well, I'm not sure they put it out. I think the Democrats are putting it out because they suffered one of the greatest defeats in the history of politics in this country.
That is not true. The National Intelligence Agencies put this out, and now there's a bipartisan investigation into it, one which Donald Trump is against. After the assessment from the intelligence agency is that the Russians attacked our election. The White House also says that the Obama administration will conduct its own review and focus on any breaches from countries other than Russia. Two sources within the Trump transition team tell Fox News that the president-elect is expected to nominate the Exxon CEO Rex Tillerson to be the Secretary of State. As the head of one of the world's largest oil companies, Rex Tillerson has close ties to none other than Vlad Putin and the Kremlin. Putin, back in 2013, awarded him the Russian Order of Friendship, an honor for a foreign citizen. President-elect Trump has presented Tillerson's Russian ties as a selling point. And with that in mind, we have Team Fox coverage of the Trump transition and the Russian hacking. Mike Emanuel is live on Capitol Hill with more from Congress. Blake Berman from The Biz is with reaction from the White House. First to John Roberts, live at Trump Tower in Midtown with more on the Secretary of State search. John?
Shep, good afternoon to you. The announcement won't come likely for another couple of days, maybe not until the end of the week, but sources tell Fox News that Donald Trump has settled on his pick for Secretary of State, and it is, as you mentioned, the ExxonMobil president and CEO Rex Tillerson. Tillerson, sources tell me, was recommended to Trump by a number of people outside of government and a couple of very notable people who used to be in government. The former Defense Secretary Robert Gates and Condoleezza Rice are very big supporters of Tillerson's, and Tillerson is a very close friend to former Secretary of State James Baker. One of the things that Donald Trump really likes about Tillerson is that he is a deal maker, and he has crafted some very complicated deals in some of the most difficult places in the world to work. Here's what Trump said about Tillerson yesterday to Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday.
He's much more than a business executive. I mean, he's a world-class player. And to me, a great advantage is he knows many of the players. And he knows them well. He does massive deals in Russia. He does massive deals for the company, not for himself, for the company.
But it's possible that Tillerson could run into some headwinds in Congress during his confirmation, because even Republicans, Shep, are said to be very concerned about just how close his ties are to Vladimir Putin. Of course, is the head of ExxonMobil. He's got a lot of deals going in the oil patch there in Russia. And some members of Congress, including Senator John McCain, want to know just how deep those ties really run. Shep?
And John, another of the president-elect's former adversaries visited Trump Tower today.
And this one was really interesting because you will remember the nasty comments, Shep, that were flying back and forth during the primary campaign between Donald Trump and Carly Fiorina. Remember that Rolling Stone article in which Donald Trump was quoted as saying, quote, "Look at that face. Would anyone vote for that? Can you imagine that, the face of our next president?" Asked about that during a debate, Carly Fiorina said, "I think the statement speaks for itself." She went on then to call him a serial philanderer, saying that he doesn't represent me or my party, and that she would be horrified at the prospect of a Trump presidency. Well, listen to how that tune changed after she came back down the golden elevator from her meeting with Donald Trump this morning. Listen.
First, I have to say he has really cool stuff in his office. All these athletes have given him this incredible memorabilia. I was particularly taken by Shaq O'Neal's shoe, which is huge. I guess it takes a champion to know a champion.
She said that she was honored to have spent time with Donald Trump today. One of the notes, Shep, coming from the transition office, Gary Cohn, a veteran of Goldman Sachs, has been named as Donald Trump's chief economic advisor. He will head up the National Economic Council at the White House. And the day ain't over yet, Shep.
No, and those big banks are suddenly very popular all over again. John Roberts at the Tower, thank you. Now more on reports that the CIA told lawmakers and 17 U.S. intelligence agencies agree Russia interfered with the U.S. presidential election to help Donald Trump. U.S. officials told the New York Times the assessment is not based on any new and specific intelligence. Instead, it was an analysis of a mountain of circumstantial evidence, something that intelligence agencies do all the time. A senior U.S. official told the Washington Post the FBI is not so sure Russia's main goal was to help Donald Trump, but that it could have been one of its goals. But 17 national security agencies are in complete agreement. The Fox Business Network's Blake Berman with more on this live from Washington. Blake?
Hi there, Shepard. And according to the Washington Post on this one, the CIA shared several determinations with U.S. senators in a closed-door briefing. Among them, that WikiLeaks got its information from individuals connected to the Russian government, and those people are known within the intelligence community. The goal with all of it? Help elect Donald Trump to become the next president of the United States. However, that paper also reports in a separate meeting with House members, the FBI's findings were not as clear. Rather, those agents were, quote, ambiguous. Earlier this afternoon, the White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest would not comment on the intelligence, but said the ties between Mr. Trump, some members of his campaign, and Russia were publicly apparent.
He called on Russia to hack his opponent. He called on Russia to hack Secretary Clinton. So he certainly had a pretty good sense of whose side this activity was coming down on.
A bipartisan group of members on the Hill are also calling for a congressional review, Shepard. And earlier today, Earnest said it's unlikely the entirety of the Russia-related material becomes declassified for the rest of the public to see.
What else are we hearing from Trump's team on this matter?
Well, Mr. Trump's advisors are certainly following his lead on this one. They are pushing back very, very hard on this story. For example, earlier today, the transition spokesman, Jason Miller, called it an attempt to delegitimize Mr. Trump's victory. And here's what he added. He said, quote, "First, after the election, it was the recount nonsense. Then the discussion of the popular vote. Now it's anonymous, off-the-record sources with conflicting information trying to raise other issues," end quote. To put on top of that, Kellyanne Conway also said, "For some, this is just an excuse for Hillary Clinton's loss, and as she said, an insult to Mr. Trump's victory." Shepard.
Blake Berman in Washington. To be clear and to repeat, this is the assessment of 17 United States intelligence agencies, all in unanimous agreement that the Russians affected our election and put their finger on the scale. Not political, but from the intelligence agencies. Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are calling for a thorough investigation. Both Republicans and Democrats see this as an affront to American democracy after reports this weekend that the CIA found Russian hackers did indeed intervene in our presidential election to help Donald Trump. Team Fox coverage continues. Mike Emanuel on Capitol Hill. Mike?
Well, Shep, good afternoon. Top lawmakers here on Capitol Hill note that the relevant national security committees have been working the cyber issue for some time, but they say now that our democratic institutions have been targeted, more work needs to be done.
The question is, of course, what was the intention? And that's why we need an investigation. But more importantly than that, we need to finally seriously address this issue of cyber and the potential damage that it could do to our national security. And the Obama administration has done nothing.
They call cyber attacks by a foreign government a grave threat to our national security. Shep.
What are you hearing from the House Speaker?
Well, it's interesting, Shep, because he is also calling for pushing back forcefully against the Russians and condemning the action, but does say, quote, "At the same time, exploiting the work of our intelligence community for partisan purposes does a grave disservice to those professionals and potentially jeopardizes our national security. As we work to protect our democracy from foreign influence, we should not cast doubt on the clear and decisive outcome of this election." Ryan's counterpart, House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi, calls it Russia's unprecedented assault on our democracy, and Pelosi says Congress has an absolute responsibility to investigate Russia's hack of our election. Shep.
Mike Emanuel wrapping up Team Fox coverage. Michael, thank you. While Donald Trump is complaining that the reporting on Russia's interference with our elections lacks sources and specifics, the president-elect is at the same time skipping out on daily intelligence briefings. Up next, why Donald Trump says he does not need the brief every president has received for more than 60 years. Donald Trump's criticism of the reported CIA assessment on Russia is not the president-elect's only issue with our intelligence agencies. In an interview on Fox News Sunday yesterday, Donald Trump said he does not need intelligence briefings every day because, in his words, he's a smart person.
I don't have to be told the same thing and the same words every single day for the next 8 years. Could be 8 years, but 8 years. I don't need that. But I do say if something should change, let us know.
Donald Trump went on to say that of the briefing that I get it when I need it, and noted that the vice president-elect, Mike Pence, is getting daily briefings in his stead. Of course, Donald Trump's complaint with the unanimous assessment of the intelligence agencies regarding Russian interference with the election is that it lacks specifics and sources. The intelligence agencies could get that for him, as he is the president-elect. And yet he's skipping out on their briefings. Let's bring in A.B. Stoddard, associate editor with RealClearPolitics.com. That seems incongruent.
Well, Shepard, the most interesting thing about this is that the initial report was that the Russians were interfering in this election process before it sort of evolved into and trying to help Donald Trump win. And that information was given to nominee Donald Trump after his nominating convention, along with Hillary Clinton after hers, in intelligence briefings starting in August and September. They were telling members of Congress this. Leaders in Congress were very concerned. I spoke to members of the Intelligence Committee this fall, Republicans who were very alarmed at what they were learning. And as you know, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell was questioning the truth and the veracity of these reports back in September. Now he's changed his mind. So Donald Trump has been turning his ear to this now, going back several months. and has decided that Mike Pence is better suited to ingest all this intelligence on a daily basis about our varying threats and the updates that that the commander-in-chief requires, because he is not interested in these briefings. If he was, he would be taking them.
Yeah, I suppose. Interesting. I don't know if you saw the Washington Post and Jennifer Rubin's piece today. It came out late morning for any of those of you who may have read it earlier. I want to read you just a little bit. She writes, if a presidential candidate had fallen under the influence of an ex-KGB agent, it is hard to say that he would be doing anything different than Donald Trump is right now, hiring Russian sycophants, nixing anti-Russian candidates, denying overwhelming evidence of Russian espionage, suggesting that our obligations to NATO are not ironclad, ignoring human rights violations in Russia, etc. Maybe Trump is simply misinformed or careless, but why do all of his errors favor Vladimir Putin? And the last is a good question.
Right. Well, you know, he's not the first person to come into this job and want to reset with Russia. And you know that, you know, George W. Bush famously said that he looked into Vladimir Putin's eyes and he trusted him. And it happened. I mean, the same, you know, reset failed under the Obama administration with President Obama and Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State. So people try this because it would be helpful to be able to work with the Russians on some issues. And we do. But in the basically, since the annexation of Crimea and the Ukraine, and with the bold moves that Vladimir Putin has been making, people have been really put, especially in the Republican Party, on the spot here around Trump to explain why he never, ever criticizes Russian President Vladimir Putin, whether it's about what's going on in Syria, while he's working with the Assad regime to attack his own people, that when it comes to this hacking issue, he says it's ridiculous. And he's actually really speaking with great contempt about our own intelligence officials who risk their lives to inform us and help us mitigate the threats we face, but really are going to be the people he relies on. So in time after time, even if you put aside the fact that he chooses people who share his worldview on Russia, when it comes to these moments that the Republican leaders in Capitol Hill are in right now, Shep, where they're all sort of having to begrudgingly agree Russia's not our friend, Donald Trump never backs down and never criticizes the Russian president.
This one's not over. AB, thank you.
Thank you.
Ahead, the man who would be Secretary of State. By the way, guess who Rex Tillerson's really good friends with? Your boy Vlad Putin, obviously. And he stands to make a lot of money at ExxonMobil if just certain of the rules change. It wouldn't take much. Stay with us. More now on the President-elect Donald Trump's expected pick of the Secretary of State, the ExxonMobil CEO Rex Tillerson. As we reported earlier, the President-elect has presented Tillerson's ties to the Kremlin and Russian President Vladimir Putin as a selling point. But Trump's old Republican rival, Senator Marco Rubio, disagrees. He tweeted yesterday, being a friend of Vladimir is not an attribute I am hoping for from a Secretary of State. The Trump senior advisor, Kellyanne Conway, in an interview with ABC News today, defended Tillerson's Russian ties.
A leading candidate, Rex Tillerson of Exxon, has dealt with Russia for many years. It's not like he's pounding down vodka with Vladimir Putin at the local bar, but he's dealt with him in a business context. And we know we don't have a good relationship with many countries around the globe, including Russia.
This all comes after 17 U.S. intelligence agencies concluded that Russian hackers tried to interfere with the election, and the CIA told lawmakers the motive was to help Donald Trump win the White House. Jesse Burns is an associate editor for The Hill. The ties here, Jesse, go back a long, long way. You know, the reason Rex Tillerson initially got the big bumps within the Exxon company, which made him the CEO of the biggest company in the world, money-wise, is because of his early success in Russia. That he met Vlad Putin way back in 1999. That in 2012 he got this special award, Order of Friendship in 2012. It was one of the highest civilian honors that the Russians give out. And Tillerson's company, ExxonMobil, stood to make billions and billions and billions of dollars in Russia until all those sanctions got put on Russia. But were those sanctions at some point lifted, ExxonMobil would make those billions. Are there any conflicts to you apparent here?
Well, that's absolutely right. And when he was promoted in 2006, yeah, his ties to Russia were of key interest for that. Mr. Tillerson did oppose the sanctions involving Russia over the annexation of Crimea in 2014. And so, yeah, I think that big potential conflict of interest, of course, is going to be raised by Democrats in Senate confirmation hearings, but also Republicans who have already come out and expressed early concern about it.
Do you see any patterns here that are disturbing?
Well, it's interesting. It's kind of a remarkable appointment if he is, in fact, announced as the pick, as expected. He wasn't really on anyone's short list even as recently as last week, and he hails from the business community. He's worked with Exxon for 40 years. Trump, it's appealing to Trump, it seems, because he's a kind of wheeler, dealer, making deals around the world with Exxon. But he doesn't have the kind of political experience that other recent secretaries of state in modern history have. And so for some, even Republicans, that can be of concern, but especially the big conflicts of interest, just because Exxon is a huge, obviously, worldwide company.
What do you make of these? Every move is pro-Russia. There's nothing that pushes back against Vladimir Putin. If there's one direction or another with this incoming administration, it is in the favor of Vladimir Putin. Does that say anything to you?
Well, that definitely seems to be the case so far, at least, going back even months on the campaign trail with the rhetoric that we saw from now President-elect Trump. But, if he is actually serious about wanting to have closer ties with Russia, Rex Tillerson would seem to be the obvious pick, just because he has such deep ties, even personal ties, with Vladimir Putin. And so if that's the direction that Trump actually wants to go, that, is going to be the case. Whereas, Mitt Romney, of course, another Secretary of State candidate, in the last days, was an ardent foe of Russia and warning against that.
Hey, Jesse, we got this leak over the weekend. I guess the leak went to NBC News or whatever, and they tweeted it and they sent it out everywhere. And then if you're a reporter and you have ties on the Republican side, you start getting these messages like, and some of them that I was getting were, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. This isn't really happening. This can't really be true. By Monday, they'll be dialing back on this. And I kept hearing that from people, different kinds of people who I can't quote on the air, sadly. But do you see there a possibility that Rex Tillerson might not make it, as there is now clearly a lot of opposition out there?
Well, as is the case with some of these top-level cabinet picks, of course the leak is out there for a few days, and then we kind of see the initial pushback against it. Of course, the final determination, it's not final until Trump himself announces it. So we can't rule out any other possibilities. But it does seem like he is the leading candidate, and Trump is apparently intrigued by his view of the world, and of course his ties to Russia. While of great concern to Democrats and some Republicans like McCain and Marco Rubio, they don't seem to be an apparent concern to Trump, even of course this coming at the time of the intelligence community really putting the blame on Russia for the hacking over the summer of Democratic groups. And so it all is kind of coming to a head at once. We'll see, what kind of announcement Trump actually makes, and if Russia is part of his decision making.
Jesse Burns, the associate editor at The Hill. Jesse, thanks.
Absolutely.
The president-elect is doubling down on Taiwan, and Beijing is now firing back. Think problems with China would be, problematic? Wait till you hear what the Chinese have to say about Donald Trump's latest comments. That's coming as we approach the bottom of the hour and the top of the news. The president-elect is catching heat from China for his tough talk about Taiwan. On Fox News Sunday yesterday, Trump told Chris Wallace that the Chinese should be willing to make a deal if they don't want the United States to restore relations with Taiwan.
I fully understand the one China policy, but I don't know why we have to be bound by a one China policy unless we make a deal with China, having to do with other things, including trade. I mean, look, we're being hurt very badly by China with devaluation, with taxing us heavy at the borders when we don't tax them.
Beijing fired back today. A Chinese-run newspaper called Trump as ignorant as a child for his comments. And Chinese government official warns cooperation between the United States and China would be out of the question should the U.S. strengthen its ties with China. A foreign ministry spokesman in Beijing wrote today, if this foundation is wobbled and weakened, then there is no possibility for the two countries to grow their relations in a sound and steady way and cooperate on key areas. For decades, the U.S. has followed the one China policy. Under that agreement, the United States recognizes the island of Taiwan as Chinese territory and America cannot have any official relations with the so-called rebels. President-elect Trump broke from that protocol when he took a phone call from Taiwan's president after the election and with months of planning in advance. Greg Palcott is live in London tonight. What else are the Chinese saying and writing, Greg?
Beijing, Shep, is absolutely riled up about what President-elect Trump had to say. The government spokesman went on to say that Beijing has serious concerns about any meddling with that one China policy. Going on to say, and here's a quote, "We urge the new U.S. leader and the government to fully understand the seriousness of the Taiwan issue." As you mentioned, they were already taken aback by that phone call between Trump and the Taiwan president. Giving Taiwan any special treatment, it was said today by Beijing, concerns China's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Shep, if Donald Trump wanted to press Beijing's button, he certainly did.
What are analysts saying could happen if the United States does get rid of this one China policy, Greg?
There are real concerns, Shep, among regional experts that any jostling of this one China policy status quo could be destabilizing. In the words of one, it could grossly destabilize U.S. and China relations. We heard from the White House just a short time ago saying it could hurt cooperation with China on areas of shared interest. Still, critics say that China is so unhelpful on a range of issues, from trade to North Korea to regional security, it might be helpful to give it a poke or two. But the stakes, Shep, are very high, and the president-elect is going to be dealing with some very serious issues. Back to you.
Thanks very much, Greg Palcott, tonight from London. Let's bring in John Bussey, associate editor of the Wall Street Journal newspaper, a corporate cousin of ours. This is escalating?
Yeah, it is. Look, the best case scenario is probably that Trump wants to rattle China, wants to talk about a lot with them, and this is a way to do that, to say that we're going to be talking about a lot of different issues. That's the best case scenario. We don't know because we don't have Donald Trump's policies. We don't know kind of whether this was a little bit of a spark, a one-off, or whether this was long-term and intentional. At a minimum, it does show that the president-elect, he's a deal maker, and no deal is ever, finished, right? You sort of are bargaining right down to payment date on the terms. This was a deal that was made in 1979. It was closed in 1979. There was recognition of China. There was accommodations made by China in return for us rescinding our diplomatic relations with Taiwan and saying it's a one China policy.
And yet Trump wants it to now be something different, which is prerogative of president, but there is a downside potentially to that as well.
Yeah, there is. And he's saying, look, we got a lot to negotiate with them. On trade, for sure, there are tons of issues. Lack of reciprocity, lack of investment opportunities, all of this indigenous innovation. You got to transfer your technology here if you want to be in the market. That was not part of the original understanding of the WTO with China. So there's a lot of really legitimate issues, national security issues, regional security issues. When he raises currency, it's a little bit weird because China lately has been trying to prop up its currency. It's not devaluing its currency. The market is devaluing the currency. And in fact, when Donald Trump raises economic issues with China and rattles the sword a little bit here, rattles the diplomatic sword, it causes even more consternation about the Chinese economy weakening further. And guess what? The yuan continues to decline. So he's actually precipitating some of the decline. China's trying to bolster it right now. It's buying dollars and selling yuan. So not sure that the currency manipulation's the real issue here. North Korea, China's kind of fraught over that issue as well. Maybe it's trade. Who knows? We don't know.
But we do know that he seems to be siding in every circumstances that we can document. I'm talking facts, not opinion. In every circumstance we can document, he sides with Putin and against China.
Yeah, and remember, this was a campaign sort of run on issues related to China. You're losing your job to China. It's China's fault. It's our bad trade deals with China. So not surprising, maybe, that he kind of is coming out of the blocks with statements on China. No better way than to threaten the Chinese sanctity and control over Taiwan. Major domestic political issue in China. The population supports a one China policy. Taiwan is part of China. So when you kind of poke this particular issue, it reverberates right down into the population, and the Politburo is going to get upset.
Yep, hard to question that. Thank you very much, John Bussey. Nice to see you. The Islamic State has retaken the ancient city of Palmyra. just months after Syrian government troops claimed a major victory against the terrorists there. That word from both sides in the fight, although the United States State Department can't confirm it. That's really neither here nor there. Excuse me. Tis the season. Syrian opposition activists say ISIS has been rounding up dozens of people in and around Palmyra. The militants had previously spent 10 months in the city, blowing up temples and cutting off the heads of statues. The city's ruins are thousands and thousands of years old. The terrorists appear to have timed their push for Palmyra while the government was preoccupied with its ongoing battle for the city of Aleppo. Russian-backed forces have been working to push the Syrian rebels out of that city. The former congressman accused of using taxpayer dollars to decorate his office as Downton Abbey is heading to court today. He claims the charges are lies, but prosecutors say the redecorating project is just the beginning. And his own Instagram apparently helped tip off investigators. What was on the Insta? Well, that's coming. Who can forget the former Republican congressman with a flashy Instagram account and an office decorated like Downton Abbey, heading to court today on corruption charges. He is Aaron Schock. He's 35 years old. He's from Illinois. Investigators say he spent tens of thousands of dollars to live like a king. Schock took trips all over the world, posted pictures like this one of his adventures on the Instagram there thing, don't you know? Here he is surfing in Hawaii, because why not? Here you can see him jumping on a glacier. We all do. Schock also decorated his Capitol Hill office like one of the rooms in the British TV show Downton Abbey. Prosecutors say that cost taxpayers about $40K. Schock stepped down from Congress last year after getting questions about his spending. His lawyer says Aaron Schock is innocent and just made some mistakes with his bookkeeping. Ed Henry with the news in Washington. What kind of charges and jail time potentially is this ex-congressman facing, Ed?
Well, Shep, it could be years in jail. He denies these allegations, but the reason why it could be years in jail is that this was a 24-count indictment last month and alleges all kinds of misuse of funds, both campaign funds and official taxpayer funds. What's new today is that Aaron Schock, the former congressman, next hour will appear before a federal judge in Springfield, Illinois, the state capital, for arraignment on that indictment. Expected to enter a plea of not guilty to this indictment. He has denied the charges, as you say, but interesting that the indictment runs 52 pages long, Shep, and this is somebody who had been considered a rising star among Republicans. His political career now perhaps over, of course, but yes, he has a legal drama that's still playing out.
And really the social media use makes this a lot different than other congressional scandals.
Yeah, because you mentioned, those photos that he was posting himself showing his own exploits. That sort of provided, there he is dancing the tango. He was also at concerts, music concerts, out and about rafting, visiting the Great Wall of China, even posing at one point with a penguin as well. And so that was almost like a roadmap for the FBI and other law enforcement officials to try to track all this down. As for Downton Abbey, the bottom line there is the architect of the Capitol tells us, you can see the office there all in bright red and all of the extras that he decorated his office with to look like the British show. The architect of the Capitol says that once a congressman or woman leaves office, all of that, whatever they do to their office, is painted over and redecorated, so you can be sure it no longer appears like that, Shep.
All right, Ed Henry, thank you. The man who cops say shot two cops in Georgia is now dead. Investigators say police killed the guy after he opened fire on their fellow officers. Happened early this morning in Byron, Georgia, about an hour and a half south of Atlanta. Investigators there say 8 officers from a drug task force went to a house to serve a search warrant. They say nobody answered the door, so the cops went in the back way. Investigators say that's when the suspect started shooting and hit 2 officers before other cops shot him dead. Doctors say they expect both wounded officers to fully recover. Yes, it is. Not even officially winter, but parts of the country are feeling the chill. An Arctic blast moving in from Canada, bringing snow and freezing weather. Over the weekend, parts of Minnesota got about a foot of snow, about 10 inches in Detroit, 8 in Chicago. And now the cold blast is heading east. Temperatures are set to plunge through the week. Forecasters warning of chills as low as 40 degrees below zero in some spots. Just about everywhere, about 30 degrees lower than normal. They say parts of the Midwest and Northeast could see the lowest December temperatures this century. And one forecaster warns the cold weather isn't going anywhere anytime soon. Well, it is that time of year. Some more images in our slideshow here. Crews are dealing with the snow at the field from yesterday's games. This is the Steelers game yesterday. And here's some from the stands. You know, it didn't exactly look warm. Bloomfield, Michigan, now north and west of Detroit. A whole lot of snow to shovel in and around here, and the kids having fun with it. That's Asbury, Iowa, just west of Dubuque. So do you speak emoji? If so, then thumbs up, briefcase, $sign. That means Lillian has found a job for you. You know, they're not a lot of great. I mean, everybody needs a good job. Lillian has found a job. Something emoji style?
Yes, a firm in London is looking to hire an emoji translator.
Okay.
And the job is actually a lot harder than you'd initially think. Take, for example, the waving hand emoji, which here in America could mean both hello or goodbye.
Right.
And if you're in China, it's a very rude way to say goodbye and we're not friends anymore.
Oh, really?
And the firm wants somebody who can understand all the multicultural dynamics that go into emojis. Another example is this white flower thing.
I've never known what that is.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me either. But if you'd gone to school in Japan, you'd recognize it as a symbol that means good job on your homework.
Huh.
Yeah,
All
and
right.
The
That
tears
one I
of
know.
joy.
That's
yes.
go on.
But context is everything. So depending on the conversation, it could mean you're laughing so hard you're crying, or you're laughing in a self-deprecating way, or you're kind of gloating over somebody else. And no emoji translation story would be complete without the ever-controversial praying hands or high-five hands.
Yes. Oh, that's praying, isn't it?
Well,
It's one or the other.
I've always thought it's a high five, but
Oh, really?
yeah, there's no real official word on it that I know of. Some people claim to be the official sources, but
You know how we could get all around all this?
how?
Just use the words.
We could, but
We did that not very long
nearly as
ago.
fun.
No, I guess. I'm trying to incorporate them, but especially with loud bang effects.
Yeah, the thumbs up I like a lot.
Yeah,
Just
thumbs up is good.
you know, good. Okay, mom.
Yeah.
You know.
Thanks, Lillian. We'll be right back with a look at a new idea that forever changed the American road trip, giving families a place to rest up, take a break from the car, and it happened on this day in history. On this day in 1925, the first motel opened its doors on the coast of Central California. The owner designed it so that guests could just drive right up to the room. He said he wanted to provide a cheaper option for Americans who couldn't afford a hotel or didn't want to go to the trouble of finding parking in a big city. The owner originally planned to build 18 motels all along the West Coast, from Seattle all the way to San Diego. The Great Depression put an end to those plans. But his original idea does live after the first motor hotel opened for business 91 years ago today. Should news break out, we'll break in, because breaking news changes everything on Fox News Channel. The Dow's looking good yet again today. Every day is a new record, as long as we keep going up, obviously. The Dow's up 36 on the session. We're getting, a couple hundred points away from 20,000. The NASDAQ and the S&P down just a little bit, and oil is way up. Neil Cavuto knows everything business. He'll share it with you because he's a super nice guy. And I'll see you later.